Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, team, for leading us well. Howdy! Oh, I love it. Yes. They can do better. Rachel says y'all can do better. Let's try it. Dig a little deeper. Say it a little bit louder. Howdy! Woo-wee. They could do better. Man, hey, for those of you who I may not have ever met, my name is Stu Chapman. I'm the kids and family pastor here at Faith Church, and what an honor and privilege it is to be here before you guys. Normally I'm in building A or B, but today I get to be here, so thank you for having me. Just a heads up, over the last 15 plus years, my normal audience is under the age of 12. And so over those years, I've developed some odd habits of screaming, of twitching, of jumping around, doing whatever I can do to engage the audience. And if you're not accustomed to that, my word of encouragement is buckle up, Buttercup, because I can't shut it off. If you're new to Faith Church or it's been a minute since you've been around here, this is a perfect time to join us. Last week, we kicked off a new series focused on our core values. It's what Faith Church is all about. Let's go ahead and throw up the core values up here. It's Faith Church is a Christ-centered, outward-focused family of faith. Last week, our lead pastor, Stephen Hill, he did a great job kicking off the core values by talking about how Faith Church is Christ-centered. It's not what we do, rather it's who we are. Jesus isn't just an important part of our life. Jesus is our life. And at the heart of the different programs and events and services and who we are is Jesus. Today what we're going to do is we're going to explore what it looks like to be an outward-focused body of believers. And to do this, we're going to be camping out in Acts 16. So if you have your Bibles, and I hope you do, you can go ahead and turn there to Acts 16. And as you turn there, I'm going to tell you a couple stories, and these stories are going to give you insight into maybe a little bit of who I am and who my kids are. So 2 years ago, my wife Devaney and my 4 kids, Ace, Abe, Archer, and Arlie, moved up from Texas to the great state of Washington. And where Texas has been my life. I have lived all my childhood and majority of my adult life in the state of Texas. I grew up in the piney woods near Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana on this 100-plus acre farm where we had a couple of ponds. We'll leave that there, it's fine. A couple of ponds, a lake, some creeks, and a whole bunch of critters. We had horses and cows, we had dogs and cats, we had hamsters and hedgehogs and birds and fish and turtles, and we also had sheep. Most of the sheep you would love. You would think these sheep are fantastic. But there was one exception. Rob the ram. He was not sweet. He was not kind. He was evil. He was mean. He hated people. One of the things I knew as a small child is, hey, you don't spit into the wind. You don't tug on Superman's cape. And you don't mess around with the ram named Rob. And Rob the deal was if he was out of his pen, he'd run up to you like your old buddies. And then once he got to you, he'd rear up on 2 feet, tuck his chin, and pow, lay the hammer on you. I have a scar on my right hand from Rob that I got when I was a kid. One day, my parents were not at the house. I'm one of 4. I have a younger sister named Anna, and me and Anna, we drew the short stick, and we had to feed and water the sheep. That included Rob, and they were in the pen. I'm inside. One of the things I love to do is play Nintendo 64. That dates me a little bit. But I was playing GoldenEye, 007, anybody? A couple people, yeah, loved it. It was great. My sister comes in and says, hey, we got to go feed and water the sheep. Throw the controller down, and I rush over to the feed bucket because that's the easier job, and my sister was slower than me. So I got the feed bucket, and I dart over to the sheep pen. Now, all I had to do to feed the sheep was reach over the pen, dump it in the bucket. Job is done. My sister, on the other hand, who's younger than me, had the big water bucket, and she's waddling over to the sheep pen. And so she has 2 options. When she gets to the sheep pen, she can either, A, pick it up over, and then she has to do some fancy handwork there and reach through, lower, reach through, and drop the bucket lower and to get it on the ground. Or she could open the pen. But my sister Anna will tell you that is a death wish. She was not going to open that pen, so she waddles over, and she really has one option, and it's to pick it up and try and work it down. Now, as she's working it down, I'm headed back to the house. And what she recognizes is that water bucket is a little bit too big for her, so she calls out, Stuart, Help me. To which I said, nothing. I tried to ignore. Like, that is your problem. You got stuck with the water bucket. To which my sister, she screams out louder, Stuart, help me. To which at this point, I turn and I say, no. Your problem, right? I got video games to play. To which my sister, she's been blessed with some pipes. And she can scream loud, to which she screams even louder. And at this point, I'm like, she's not going away. I'm just going to run inside and then go play video games, to which I did. Left her alone there, darted off, played video games. And my sister continued to scream. My sister screamed so loud, one of our closest neighbors, which lived 1.25 miles away, Miss Pat, called the house because she heard some death screams happening over at the Chapman's house, just checking in on us, making sure we were okay. We were fine. But one of the takeaways from this that you may notice is I had and still have a problem of thinking of myself too much sometimes instead of thinking of others. Bad news is I think I passed it on to my kids. This was many years ago. This was at least 2 kids ago. We were doing pizza night. And I don't know if y'all do pizza night in your house. If you don't, you should, regardless if you have kids or not, because pizza nights make life a little bit better. But we wanted to elevate it. We wanted to make it a little bit better. So what we did was we were going to introduce our kids to not just pepperoni pizza. They'd already had that, but they had not had dessert pizza. Oh, that's right. So Ace, our oldest, he's 3-ish, 4-ish at the time, and we bust open that dessert pizza after he had his pepperoni, and we're like, Ace, you want some dessert pizza? Eyes got big, mouth is open wide, and we're like, I know. It's fantastic. To which he takes his one piece, the one piece we were going to allow him to eat, and he starts to pound it. And it's the greatest thing he's ever had in his life. And he wants more. And we're like, hey, buddy, no more. That's your one piece. You don't need any more sugar. Trust me. We closed the box. We pushed it out of reach, arm's reach. And I had to get up, and I had to go do something in the garage. So I get up, and I leave. My wife, she darts off to the bedroom. And when I come back from the garage, I come back, and I notice, that's odd. Ace is no longer at the table. Ace is missing. Hey, Ace, where you at? So I go and I check the living room. He's not there. I check his bedroom. He's not there. The bathroom, maybe playing? Nope, he's not there. He's not in our bedroom. He's not in the study. He's not in the kitchen. I go outside with a little bit of a panic, and I'm thinking, where is Ace at? He's not outside either. So I come inside flustered, and I go around the backside of the table, to which I nearly kick him. He's underneath the table, and I look down, and he has not one, but 2 half-eaten dessert pizzas that he's just pounding, and he is having the time of his life. My kids had and still do have a problem of thinking of themselves too much sometimes instead of thinking of others. And one of the things that I've noticed over the last 15 plus years of working in ministry is that if the church is not intentional, keyword intentional, we have a tendency to be inward focused. Kind of like my failure to help my sister in her time of need with the water bucket, or my kids blatantly ignoring me whenever I say, hey, only one piece of dessert pizza, please. The church, especially older churches, those that have been around a while, that have rich traditions, I think can have a problem of thinking inwardly too much and thinking of themselves too much as opposed to thinking of others. You may be sitting there wondering, Stu, what are you talking about? What exactly does an inward-focused church look like? And I am so glad you asked. Inward-focused churches are more likely to ask, what about me? Instead of what about those outside the walls of the church. Inward-focused churches are more likely to ignore guests visiting church. And if you're new and you're visiting, I just want to pause for a second and say welcome. And thanks for joining us. We are so glad that you're here. Inward-focused churches are more likely to guard or protect the old way and expect the new people to adapt to the established ways. Inward-focused churches refuse to multiply their small groups and aren't willing to add new people to their groups. Inward-focused churches aren't known by their surrounding community because they are closed off from their communities. Inward-focused churches are evangelistically apathetic. This morning, what I want us to do is to define what an outward-focused life looks like. And to do so, we're going to look at a couple of individuals found in the New Testament in the book of Acts, chapter 16. The 2 individuals, and I use visuals oftentimes when I teach. Again, little people's who I usually work with. We got Paul and we got Silas are the two main characters in Acts chapter 16. There's others involved, but those are two big characters. And for those who've been around the church for a while, Paul is somebody you've probably heard of before. He is the former Pharisee. He used to be a Pharisee, and man, he was a force to be reckoned with. If you are a follower of Jesus, he was after you. His goal was to prevent you from sharing and spreading the message of Jesus Christ. And what he would do is he would arrest you. He would put you on trial or worse. Paul, you didn't want to mess with Rob the Ram, and you didn't want to mess with Paul if you're a follower of Jesus. But Paul's life dramatically changed on an old dusty road on the way to Damascus one day when he got knocked down and he had an interaction with Jesus Christ. And he went from a Jesus hater to being a passionate, changed life, living loudly for Jesus. And then you got Silas. Silas is one of the first missionaries who took the story of Jesus on some dangerous journeys and risked his health and risked his safety for the gospel. Silas worked closely with Paul to help groups of people come together and learn how to follow Jesus. And at this time, as we enter in Acts 16, they are on a missionary trip together. There's some others with them, but they're on this trip together. And one of the things they're doing is they're going to encourage younger churches that Paul had started in a previous missionary trip. They're going to go encourage those churches, check in on those churches, and they venture out and they check in on some towns that don't have any established churches in an attempt to spread the message of Jesus. But one night, while Paul and Silas are snoozing, they're cutting some Z's, they're over in what would be present-day Turkey on the western portion of it. They're taking a nap, sleeping, and all of a sudden, God gives Paul a vision in the form of a dream. Acts 16, verses 9 and 10 is where I'm starting off. And it says, during the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, come over to Macedonia and help us. After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Paul's dreaming, has a vision, come to Macedonia. God is telling us, Silas, we got to go to Macedonia. So they hop a ship across the Aegean Sea and go to present-day Greece or Macedonia. And one of the towns that they land in is the town called Philippi. And there's some good stuff that happens while they are in Philippi. In fact, they leave the city gates and they go down to the creek or river down there where there's a group of ladies. They began to do one of the things that they did so well, and it's share the message of Jesus with these ladies. One of those ladies is a lady named Lydia. Lydia is a dealer in purple fabrics. Purple fabrics are the fancy fabrics. That's the fabrics that not the common folk use, but the fancy-pantsy upper class, because it was expensive. The process to make the purple dye was a laborious process, so it was expensive. This is what it says about Lydia. On verse 13 of chapter 16, it says, on the Sabbath we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city nearby, who was a worshiper of God, and the Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. Again, Paul and Silas are at the river. They're doing one of the things that they love to do. They're sharing the message of Jesus. Lydia, a worshiper of God, did not realize that the Messiah had come. The chosen one had come. Where was she? She missed that. But she signed up and she says, I want to go all in. Lydia says, let's go. SKO, let's go. Let's do this thing. And then we keep reading, because it's not just Lydia that is affected and impacted by this interaction. In verse 15, it says, when she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to come to her home. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. Not only Lydia, but Lydia's family as well said, hey, we want to go all in. And we don't want to keep this a secret. We want everybody to know this. Let's make a public announcement. Let's get baptized. Let's go. To which they do. I love this little interaction here because God is using Paul and Silas to change the lives of others. God is changing her life, but he's using Paul and Silas as a vessel.
The story continues, and they have an interaction with a servant girl who is possessed by an evil spirit. It says in verse 16, once, when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit by which she predicted the future, and she earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. Verse 17, this girl followed Paul and the rest of us shouting, these men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. She kept this up for many days, and finally Paul, he became so troubled that he turned around and he said to the spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her. And at that moment, the spirit left her. So we have this servant girl, and clearly something is off. And what Paul does, though, is he recognizes that there's an evil spirit about her. And so what Paul does when he speaks directly to the evil spirit. And he calls the evil spirit out in the name of Jesus, to which the evil spirit responds and flees. And I think for most of us, we would say, that's a good thing. That's awesome. That's great. But in this story, there's people who are making money off of her and now are no longer to make money off of her. And it gets a little intense. This is where Paul and Silas are beaten and thrown into jail. If you look down in verse 23, it says, after they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer commanded the guard who's going to watch over them, he commanded the guard to guard them carefully. Upon receiving such orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. Now, all of a sudden, Paul and Silas, their good day is turned to a bad day. And in fact, I guess they were such a threat, I don't know. They tell the guard specifically, hey, watch them carefully, to which he says, okay, I'm not going to put them on the outer cells, the ones that are a little bit easier to maybe escape from. I'm putting them on the inner cell. And not only am I going to put them in the inner cell, but I'm also going to lock up their feet, put them in the stocks. Now they're stuck. Now we are having a bad day. And I think if you're like me, bad days I don't get excited about. I'm not happy about. Maybe I pout a little bit. Maybe I get a little bit angry. But their reaction and their response to their bad day is fantastic. If you look in verse 25, it says, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Last week we talked about how we are Christ-centered. And Paul and Silas are as well, and this is an example of how they are Christ-centered in the middle of the inner cell, feet locked up over a crime. What crime did they commit? They're praying to God and praising God. I love that reaction. Great example of being Christ-centered. Then the story takes a bit of a turn, because now in the story it says there's an earthquake, and the earthquake affects the jail and the jail guard and the gates. It says here in verse 26, it says, suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison doors flew open and everybody's chains came loose. The jailer woke up in a panic. Gates are open. What in the world happened to this place? And he's thinking to himself, everybody has escaped. To which the jailer, if everybody escapes, he is the one that is held responsible. He is the one that is held responsible, and it doesn't end well for him if people escape. To which he says, I'm going to take matters into my own hand. I'm going to take my sword, and I'm just going to go ahead and end my life. Paul, in the inner cell, recognizes what's going on, and he shouts to the guard. He says this in verse 28, don't harm yourself. We are all here. Easy. Hold up. Put it down. We're all here. We didn't run. We didn't go nowhere. We are still here. To which the guard's response was fantastic. It says in 29, the jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? What must I do to be saved? Paul and Silas, what must I do to be saved? He recognized that there's something different about these two. There's something different. It's like, you should be pouting in the inner cell, not praising in the inner cell. I want what you got. To which Paul and Silas, they respond. And they do what they've done so often. It says here that they replied. Believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. And it says, then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all the others in his house. And at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds, and then immediately he and his family were baptized. And the jailer brought them to his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole family. Eventually, Paul and Silas are let out of prison. Eventually. And they make one stop, and they go and visit their good friend Lydia, the dealer of the purple fabric. But I love this story because over and over again, we see how God uses Paul and Silas to change the lives of others. He uses them as a vessel. But before Acts 16 ever took place, one thing to keep in mind is that God changed the lives of Paul and Silas. And they began living a life that wasn't focused on themselves, wasn't focused on their kids, wasn't focused on the troubles and worries that they had in life, but rather their lives were centered and focused on who? Yeah, totally focused on Jesus. Now, Christ-centered life is not something they did, rather it was who they were. And as they journeyed through life, they were focused on others. They were living an outward-focused life by planting churches and sharing Jesus who were within arm's reach. People like Lydia, people like the jailer. And I do think it is important to emphasize that while they were in the inner cell, while most of us may be pouting, they're not saying, woe is me, but they're saying, wow is he. Wow is he. Christ-centered life, what does it look like? Wow is he. Regardless of what's going on in my life, it is wow is he. And then time and time again, we see them impacting, God using them to impact the lives of others. The big point of this story is that Paul and Silas are outward focused. They take advantage of situations to share and show Jesus. And for them, it's a way of life. It's weaved into the daily flow and cadence of their life. And I think oftentimes, if we can be honest, we serve at a one-time event, and we think to ourselves, man, I served at this one-time event. I'm going to check the outward focus box. I'm going to check the outreach box, and I can't wait to do it again next year. One-time serving events are great, and we need you to keep signing up for one-time serving events. But it's an incomplete picture of an outward-focused life. Because embracing the outward-focused value is a way. It's not a day. It's all of us saying that we will intentionally go out of our way to make a spiritual difference in the lives of others. It's showing and sharing the gospel with others so that they can come to know Jesus. Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And I realize this is a big room with diverse backgrounds and opinions. And I realize some of you are probably saying, Stu, I get it. Being outward focused is a value of this church and it's good, but that ain't me. I tend to keep my faith beliefs, my opinions to myself, especially with those I don't know, and especially those that I do know. But keep in mind that the story and message of Jesus is not one to hoard. Because if they did hoard it, I don't know that I would know this story if my dad didn't share his faith with me when I was 9 years old in the rocking chair early one Saturday morning. What if Dad hoarded that message? For those of you who are thinking, this ain't for me, my pushback for you is that it's exactly what we're called to do. If you are Christ-centered, this is exactly what we should be doing. And please hear me, I don't always get it right. If you were here a few weeks ago, between services, we had an individual over in the parking lot with his 2 kids holding a cardboard sign that basically said, hey, I need some help. I'm standing over in Building B, right at the front with Noel. And we're standing there chatting about something, and then Molly, one of our volunteers, comes rushing in, and she says, hey, Stu, Noel, just so you know, there's an individual holding a cardboard sign saying, I need help with his 2 kids. And I say, hey, say no more. And I'll dart over to the safety team because I'm going to tell the safety team, hey, we got a situation. And Noelle rushes behind me as I'm telling safety team about this situation. She taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, Molly wanted me to tell you that she's telling us not to have them kicked off campus, but rather so that somebody can help them. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing, for sure. Yeah, totally. I don't always get it right. And I think oftentimes when we have outward-focused opportunities before us, oh man, it is so easy to come up with the excuses. Like maybe it's a safety issue, or maybe it could get a little bit awkward. Maybe you have a fear of rejection. But it's what we're called to do. It's what we are called to do as followers of Jesus, is to share the message of Jesus with others. And I think for some of us, it may be easier to think of, what does it look like to live an outward-focused life? And maybe it's easiest to think of it as, and what's some small steps that we could take? What are small steps? Not big steps, not big leaps, just small steps. I like to think of life in small steps. And maybe some of you cats out there can simply, a step you can take is self-evaluate. You can ask yourself, am I living an outward-focused life? Right here, right now, am I living an outward-focused life? Are my actions and words reflecting Jesus and pointing others to Jesus? Like, do I reflect joy when I'm stuck in the inner cells of life and things aren't going my way? Do I show patience when my kids are unhinged? Do I show love to my fellow drivers in rush hour? But am I living an outward-focused life? Maybe another step is to think of one person in your radius who needs Christ-centered encouragement. What I love about Paul and Silas is that they are impacting those within an arm's reach. They don't have to look hard to show and reflect Jesus. Who is someone that you have in your life that needs a message of hope? Who is your Lydia? Like, I'm sure there's a Lydia in your life. There's a jail guard somewhere in your life. Hopefully not literally. Like for the wrong reasons. But who is your Lydia? And if you're sitting there thinking, Stu, man, I got nobody. I can't think of a soul. Maybe you can start here. Maybe you can simply think of the people who live across from you, or behind you, or next to you, or over this way. Like maybe a step is to simply pray for those individuals. Maybe a step is simply saying, okay, today I'm going to pray around this building of my apartment complex, or I'm going to pray down my street. Do you know the individuals by name, by chance? Like, do you know their kids' names, their dogs' names, the fears, the struggles they have, their interests? Like, if not, maybe this is an opportunity to make some chocolate chip cookies. Who's with me? Or I actually like banana bread. That's some really good stuff. But maybe it's an excuse, an opportunity to make something, bake something so you can go meet somebody. And then you can figure out, man, how can I best pray for this individual? Like, what's a step that you need to take? If you need a little more inspiration, there's nobody more outward focused than Jesus. If you study the life and work of Jesus over and over again, we see Jesus in pursuit of the furthest out and the least of these. If you're new to faith, if you're new to this whole church thing and Jesus thing, my word of encouragement for you is to, in the Bible, there's two massive sections, the Old Testament and then the New Testament. And the first four books of the New Testament are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that tell the birth and the life and work of Jesus and his death and resurrection. And you can take a deep dive on how Jesus lived his life. And you can evaluate for yourself, was it outward focused? Before we leave today, actually as the worship team comes on back up, Mark 10:45, Jesus says this. He says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve other people. There's two things I want to do real quick before we leave. First thing is this. This is a side note. I recognize this isn't the primary focus of what I'm trying to say today. But if you're sitting there in your seat and you're like, man, I feel like I'm in the inner cell of life, and life right now is crummy, and it's hard, and it's a struggle, if that is you, we have a team of people I'd love for you to go see when they're singing the last song. We have a team of folks who'll stand on the wings out to the side, and they would love nothing more than just to pray with you. Maybe give you a little word of encouragement as you are sitting there in the inner cell, and your feet are in the stocks. Man, they would love to pray with you. The other thing is that for those of you who are like, man, I wouldn't mind exploring what it looks like to weave this outward focused value into my life, what opportunities does Faith Church have? We have tons and tons and tons of opportunities for you guys to get involved in some outward focused initiatives. And I want to throw up some real quick. I think there's 6 that we're going to throw up. And some of these ministries are within this church, and some ministries are those that we support. But we have ministries like Kids of Character. Starting on September 28th, we will be welcoming kids from Meridian Elementary for early release on Wednesdays into Building B. Currently, we can take a max of 36 kids, and we have a wait list presently. We need more leaders who'd be willing to sign up to say, hey, I want to impact the kingdom by investing in these kids who come from all walks of life, all different faiths, on Wednesday afternoons. There is a team of people at this church who pray for the Meridian staff by name. Man, I'd love to connect you with Karen Marston, who leads that team and leads that team so well. We have Young Life. Young Life, Kent Young Life, man, they pursue the furthest out kids, middle school kids and high school kids. They're short leaders right now at Kent Lake. Love to connect you with Megan Jones. Union Gospel Mission. Man, they do, among many, many other things, they serve the homeless community here in this area. There's Gateway. They send medical supplies all over the globe. They need help. We got an email recently, this week, about an Afghani family who has furniture needs. They need help with furniture. If you got extra furniture, you don't mind giving it up, man, we would love to connect you with that family and that team that is serving that family. If anything, any of this outward focused stuff interests you, would love for you to send an email to office@faithkent.org. We'd love to connect you guys with some of those opportunities that we have. Remember this, embracing the outward focused value is a way. It's not a day. Y'all pray with me real quick. God, we love you. And we are so grateful for Sundays where we get to gather together and we get to crack open your word and we get to learn together and grow together, God. This is a privilege for us, a value for us to be able to focus on other people to bring your message of hope to them. God, and I recognize for a lot of people that's a scary proposition. So we ask for courage for each one of us, myself included, to take small steps towards being outward focused, of bringing your story, your message of hope to others. God, we love you and pray all these things in Jesus' name. And all God's people said,